And the reason we concentrate on nutrition is because that's a large portion of
hey, will you hit record?
I realize that we can argue all day on whether we should give 1 or 2 vaccinations that cost
give me any idea what I should adjust.
a piece,
Yes.
and may or may not be all that important.
Okay.
But some changes in our feeding or economics in our
Right.
feeding can make a difference. I did see an article here just recently where we had the feed costs a little less. And I would also say at the outset that I'll be discussing briefly here feeding of the ewe. I read a response to a webinar that Whit Stewart's going to be putting on sheep nutrition, and someone wrote in on Facebook, I don't plan to do that because all nutritionists do is to tell you to feed more corn. That's not all we do, but I also realize that there are a group of people that think that corn is evil or grain is evil in their operation. We've got to be all grass and all natural and harvest the grass. And I appreciate people's attitude with that. And there are some forage situations that make a lot of sense. I would also say as long as you can graze. I'll be talking about harvest and feed here all the time. But as long as you can graze, if you're out on alfalfa, aftermath, and there's some protein, enough protein there. John and I just talked about cornstalk grazing, excellent source of feed for sheep, but it's usually the most economical route. Right now, a lot of us are getting close to lambing, and are lambing already. And we okay? We are lambing already, and we don't have grazing opportunities, and so we're forced to be feeding. I want to say just a word about this is the old slide set. I revised the slide set last night. Well, don't work with these.
You sure? I can get the other ones up.
Yeah, how much? This will work.
Okay, sorry.
It'll work.
I thought I pulled it off the chip.
Technology is great. I had just a comment or two here on the economics. And looking at some ASI data, American Sheep Industry data, on cost of production, and it looks to me like the summary of North Dakota, Wyoming, and some in Indiana, the variable and fixed cost is somewhere in the neighborhood of $140, $145, $50 per ewe per year. Now that can go up or it can go down. And unfortunately, you don't have it on the slides, you don't have it in your handout. But if you use that $140, $150, use a 70-pound lamb at $2 a pound, you can see pretty close here to break even on one lamb. So that's the importance of this lambing and kitting fuel, because most of your loss, this later, is going to be occurring in the first 24, 48 hours, 3 or 4 days after birth. And the more of those lambs that we can save and get to market, I kind of look at any time we're over 120, 30%, that's just profit. Anything less than that, that probably are just going to be breaking even. And like Brian Vanderley says, we're just enjoying it. And I can enjoy that as long as my wife can tolerate it. But let's move on then from different feed stuff. This was discussed earlier. I kind of divided into energy, protein. Energy would be your high starch, corn, all the way. Your protein feeds would be soybean meal, distillers grains. I would like to say one thing about distillers grains while I'm here. I know that some have said that you can't feed distillers grain to sheep without killing them. You can. You fed up to at least 25% of their diet, which is a pretty high level of distillers grain. And the only time I've ever seen any problem with that is if you happen to get a bad load. And Dr. Hart talked about high sulfur, but for the most part, lots of distillers grains can be fed to sheep without any problem. But anyway, we kind of divide these into these two different categories. Now, your pasture alfalfa or some of your sweet peas, corn, oats, barley type peas are kind of a combination. And as you look at the crude protein of corn, oats, and barley, we're relatively low in protein, very, very high in energy, with the exception of oats. Oats, because of the fiber content, not really a high source. But you look at some of your protein feeds, high 40, 30 in that range, still good energy feeds. Unless you get into some of these commercial supplements that have close to fiber in. As far as the commercial feeds are concerned, the sweet peas will be, and I call them sweet peas, 10 to 16. Like sometimes we believe, really not real high energy because we sometimes don't call the fiber for their oats or high type things in there. Sweet peas need to be high energy and higher in protein. I like to start at 18, 19% on protein for sweet peas. High levels of energy. Your growing peas back off. Your liquids are going to be 19-20%. Usually can vary whether they're using distillers grains or using high molasses product. As far as I'm concerned, these things here are the things we ought to be always comparing with using. That's we're producing here in Nebraska. And regular people would like to eat a lot of cottonseed hulls. Good feed produced in Texas, brought up here, palatable, but expensive and actually low energy. These are what we specialize here in the state of Nebraska. We produce them here with the cheapest sources, which I'll show here in a minute. And the combination of these two simple ingredients just works miracles. Now, that doesn't mean meadow hay, upland hay, sorghum hay, fine stem oat hay, millet hay, fine stem millet hay, you get it. That doesn't mean they can't be utilized and ought to be considered. But these are the two that I'm going to be comparing with. If you look at the value of feeds on cost of nutrients, I've got corn, alfalfa, sweet feed up here, and then the tubs. And this is how much does it cost to there in the third column, fourth column over. Cost per pound of protein in the last column on your right is cost of TDN. Your corn is going to be, and that's my new slide that you're not seeing. Would have had corn at $7.50 a pound or 4 1/4 a bushel. I realize you can't sell it for 4 1/4, but if you're going down and buying it in bulk, you can get it for 4 1/4, maybe a little less right now. I agree, it should be less. I was trying to. Now this is the wrong number here. I apologize for that. Alfalfa 160 a ton is about where it's at, probably in a lot of the areas. But even then, you can see the cheap source of energy is corn, and actually that's 8 cents over there if corn is $7.50 or 4 1/4 a bushel. Probably about 7 cents, 3.60, 3.80. You're selling it. All you're going to get out of it today. For your commercial feeds are going to be both usually higher in both protein, and I just to put that on a little more simple terms. Again, our numbers will be off here a little bit. If I buy 2 pounds of sweet pea for $12 a bag, $24 a hundred, I get a quarter of a pound of protein, a pound and a half of TDA. And it costs me about 50 cents. Now, I can go and buy alfalfa for 160 a ton, or corn for 4 1/4. Not what it says, but I can do, corn for 4 1/4, and it costs me 15 cents a day. 15 cents versus 28 cents a day. So I'm feeding 25 ewes for 1 month, 360 or $112, about $250 a month difference. And for me, that's enough for me to do that. Now, I don't get a free bag doing that. I don't get the salesmanship. I don't get a roast beef dinner with lukewarm green beans or other people meeting. But I can do this more economical. As far as feeding a late pregnancy ewe, which some of us have now, or just same as Dr. Hartley's saying, I just boil it down here. Let's just feed them. First of all, we start with the requirements. Here in a late, and we've got these tables available for you, but a 165-pound ewe, late pregnancy, is going to need about a half a pound of protein, about 3.5 pounds of feeding. And that's what the NRC, National Research Council, will get. And I can solve that problem by feeding 5 pounds of alfalfa and a little over half a pound of corn. And I'll get more protein than I need because of the protein in the alfalfa, and I'll get my energy. Yes.
What about you have a bunch of ewes running out, and some way you have to supplement? Obviously, it's pretty hard to supplement, whole corn. What's the practical way of supplementing those ewes running out in that kind of circumstance?
Well, first of all, I feed whole corn on the ground, and they clean it up very well. So I wouldn't accept it. It's not practical to do it. Now, the only other alternative, better alternative would be a higher.
And can you spread your
small?
If you had a relatively large block out there, can you spread that dry corn out enough in order that one doesn't overload on it?
No, I'm sorry, we may be leaving the broken bow people out here, and if I am, I'll repeat the question. Is it practical to feed? The comment was it's impractical to feed corn on the ground, and I disagree that it is practical to feed corn on good solid ground. The question is, can it be spread out enough? You run over more ewes than you'd like to with the feed truck. They'll gather around there. It's a good place to bring border collie dogs, keep those sheep off the feed. They're hard, in my opinion. I want to let the gentleman answer here. If you had grain on the ground,
my name's Crawford, main board Nebraska. I feed shell corn on pivot pads around about 300 ewes perishing. And I started feeding here a week, 10 days ago because they're due to lamb on the 1st of March. There's absolutely none left where I feed. None. I was lucky this year. The farmer sprayed rye on the corn before he picked it. About a month before he picked it, we got a large rain, so the rye was up. I put them in that same cornfield, not the same shoe, but in it for 8 to 10 years. Always when I put them in, they always go around the perimeter and eat the grass on the perimeter before they started going down the corn rows. This year here, with the rye in there, the guy's going to be mad because they made all his rye out. But that's all they do it. But I feed a lot of shell corn, and I shouldn't say a lot, but I started out at a half pound per head per day because one thing is cold, and then they're getting close to landing and that stuff.
Do you ever have any trouble John, I think the answer, and the broken bow people who tell them things where it says it's got a lot of old corn on the ground along with some rye pasture, gets along great with it. And I'd ask him, you string it out without any problem. And
Border Collie dog is the best. I'd be totally lost without it. But I could put, I just figure 25 pounds to the bucket, and I'll put so many buckets on the tailgate of my pickup. Every once in a while, I'll have an old timer. I'm saying I'm not young, but drive the pickup and string it out, and you don't never find it.
I'm not concerned about that. I was just wondering about if you had 2,000 ewes out there, about stringing out long enough to get every ewe up to that and not have a problem where the first ewe finishes the first bunch and she might overload on it elsewhere as you strung it out.
You're just eating a pound a day. You're going to string it out. They're going to clean it up in 10 minutes. And you won't, well, they'll get the most of it out in 10 minutes.
They'll learn real fast.
They will follow you. Ewes are very opportunistic, it seems to me. You know, you can feed them all the great grain here, and if you go over here, they're going to go over and see if it's any better. And so that's not been a problem. I don't think it would be. They may need to move very fast. And I look back there that I put up with quite frequently and saying I need to move a little faster. Just the point here is when they land. Let me back up here just a second. When that ewe is in late gestation and she's got twins or maybe triplets, she doesn't have the capacity to store as much feed. You can get by with some pretty poor quality feed during the early part of gestation when the fetus is about that big around. And when you start putting 16 pounds of fetus in there, along with 16 pounds of fluid, it restricts that rumen capacity. So you've got to put high quality nutrients in. You can't use bean straw very effectively because there's just not enough capacity. So you've got to have nutrient dense. So that's the time to be feeding her high quality feed. When she lactates, as Dr. Hart talked about on the goats, you've got to increase here. Feed the requirements go up to a pound of protein, 4.5 pounds of PDN. That's not just a number for you. And what this does is add up to a little over a pound of protein, a little over 4.5 pounds with rounding this off to 6 1. Just that. It's not complicated. Processing feeds, there's no advantages of cracking corn for ewes. And the only time I would ever crack corn would be if you were trying to build a creek feed for very young lambs, getting them started, adding some soybean meal with that or whatever palatable feed, maybe some oats, palatable. You need to get those started. Now, I personally, I use a commercial feed for a creek feed. It could be textured or it could be pelleted. I don't think it makes any difference. But I try to get about an 18% highly palatable creek feed to get them started. As soon as they're started good, then I start mixing some first cracked corn that I don't crack it. Actually, crack the whole corn will work better in lambs because they will process it themselves. You don't have as much of a challenge with acidosis, sour bellies problem. So I prefer whole corn. As far as hay, long hay can be fed well as long as you keep the waste down. It is, sheep are just really good about wasting. They like to have lay on, I guess. And so 20, 30, 40% waste on hay is not uncommon if you don't really make them clean it up. And I know if they've all got first names, you don't want to force them to make them clean it up. But they're going to waste some if you don't. You can grind it, get rid of that, And then I grind and mix with wet. Unfortunately, I have wet beef pulp, so it makes a perfect ration, ground hay, and I don't have to deal with waste. These wet distillers grains work very well. Water works. I don't like it. Just here, the only feed additive that I know is available for sheep is Volvatec Rumensin is cleared for goats, of course, and Volvatec helps a little bit in control of coccidia. It does help control coccidia, which is a problem in sheep, and especially in some conditions that are not always the most favorable. And then it does give you a little bit of performance enhancement. You hope in lambs to cut back, and this is more for lambs anyway, to cut back with the acidosis. There are many other additives that are advertised, diatomaceous clay, yucca, all of those things. Basically, they're based on testimonials that feed a thimble full of this, they perform miracles, and it does for the feed company. The people sell it, probably doesn't do the sheep. That's good. I'm not, John has accused me of being a minimalist. That means that I don't like to spend money, and if it doesn't pay me, I don't like to spend money. Here's another. I had a slide here on minerals. I'll briefly say need salt. I feed iodized salt. I know I use a block. I know people will argue about that. And as far as calcium and phosphorus is concerned, the other slide had some question marks on it. I don't feed any calcium and phosphorus. If I'm feeding alfalfa and corn, I've got on spring grass, I've got plenty of calcium and phosphorus on spring grass. I don't feed them. And I can show you the calculations to show you that's right. Now, I have fed some minerals, and Dr. Hart said you may eat up to 1/4 pound a day. They may eat a 1/3 of a pound a day, half a pound a day. And they don't need to eat very little of that. You don't sell mineral, put some additives in there to get them to eat a lot. You sell more minerals that way. But it doesn't help. You need to ask whether it's going to help the sheep. As far as seleniums, there are some parts of the country that need selenium. North of the White River, you've got too much already, and certainly don't want any mineral. Copper is the one, I'm sure you know this, the sheep business. Do not use goat or cattle mineral for sheep because copper levels is toxic to sheep. And so there's plenty of copper. He says it's deficient in Nebraska. It is for cattle probably, but not for sheep. There's plenty of copper in our Nebraska feeds to meet the sheep requirement. They do have a requirement, and you can feed a little copper and get away with it, but they don't really need to. I had another slide, forgot what it was, so we'll just finish it up here. Any questions or comments?
What is the problem with wet distillers grain? You said if you get up to 25%, above 25%, you could kill some.
Oh, it's been reported, and it probably I could use this number of 30% for copper toxicity is a problem, and probably the sulfur level has screwed up some. And so there has been some reports of high levels. 30%. I asked Elon Erickson this question, he's on 30%. And I have no reason to disagree with that other than you have reports. I think perhaps the load of feed, the sulfur was extremely high. Maybe it was.
And if you had a spring lambing herd, could you imagine, if you had a spring lambing herd, I'm talking a May. Okay. I hate to show my biases. If you have a spring herd lambing block, say May, could you imagine the circumstance where there wouldn't be any, if you had an open winter, any supplemental feeding or supplementation?
The question is, if you have a spring lambing flock, would you ever need any supplementation? I guess that would depend on what kind of forage you were going through the winter with, but if you're using corn stalks and some corners, as he was saying, some corners with some ryegrass, you can graze them all year without, or feed them, graze them all year without any supplement. I can see that. Salt. I like to use iodized salt. I don't know that I'm right on that. I know what I do, but I don't know that I'm right. I am pretty sure I'm right as long as I'm feeding corn and getting phosphorus out of corn and calcium out of alfalfa. I'm just going fine with that. If I look at the analysis on good spring grass, 25% phosphorus, over 1% calcium, you can't justify it. But I'm still, yes, I can see a situation where you can get by with no supplements.
And once you wean those lambs and you have them on you're trying to feed them on a finishing ration, give us some benchmarks on average daily gain, costs of gain, that sort of thing, days on feed. Give us some rough figures on what is the benchmark.
Question is, how would you finish lambs?
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, I can tell you what I personally do. I self-feed whole shell corn with a little bit of hay pellets, and then I have a protein supplement in there that has calcium and salt, all the trace minerals I need. I expect at least 2/3 of a pound of gain per head per day. I'd like to get 7,500s, but I don't a lot of time. I hear people getting 7,500s to a pound of gain. And I think you can on some of these spring coming down out of the mountains that are green. I think you can try to get a little better. Cost of gain will be very similar to cattle gain. Those lambs are going to be very cost of gain on corn. But lambs are very efficient, probably the most efficient. 4.5 pounds of feed per pound of gain is not uncommon on good spring lambs. Now, if you get in these yearling lambs, then efficiency will go up. Figure on, Dave, would you be 6 cents a pound, 7 cents a pound?
Yeah, your target should be 0.6 of a pound. And just, yeah, you're right on a bunch of that. The old timer rule of thoughts, it takes 10 bushels to finish a lamb. So your 80-pound lamb, its natural endpoint should be somewhere around 140, 145 pounds. It takes 10 bushels of corn to do that. So every time corn goes up a dime, lambs go down $1. Okay, that's how that works.
It's interesting you use that number. I went through my own numbers. I'm about 9 bushels of corn from a 50, 60 pound to 150 pound lamb.
Yeah, that's the old rule.
Same number.
This is a marketing question. What is the seasonality of lamb prices on fed lambs? What's the, is there a spring premium in lamb prices like there is in fed cattle?
I will let Dave respond to this. I think the data now shows the old Easter market that used to be the one you shot for was that Easter spring is no longer there. It's probably, if there's a seasonal low, I would not want to use seasonal marketing to determine my production methods because I will miss it as much as I'll get it. But if it's low, it's probably Dave in November, December kind of thing.
It's all the rules when I was growing up have been thrown out and changed.
Yes.
So Easter market still exists, but you need to be talking to your buyer of those lambs. So you're setting up, like last year, I was working with a producer who was trying to hit the Easter market. The problem was that the Easter market was 3 weeks later than it normally is, and that allowed a whole bunch of other lambs into the deal. But if it's an early deal and you're a January lamber, you've got an opportunity to bring some lambs to hit that market. So you need to be aware of that. Then the Muslim holidays are all over the place, and they might have it 1 month and then the next year it's at a different time. So it becomes a very big communication relationship with whoever you're working with to market them lambs, to know when they want them and then whether you want to be providing them at that time.
Off the topic, but the other real challenge we have and the problem we have, our production and our consumption here is not really good indicators of, not good directors of the market, because we import 55–60% of our lamb. So about the time we cut our production back, and we've got way too much lamb in cold storage. So you can take all the imports, all the cold storage, we've got fluctuations of markets are really.
So you wouldn't plan your production system based on hitting a market. You do it more based on cost of production rather than
Efficiency of production.
unlike cattle.
No, you need to be communicating with people and what style lamb you have. But understand, 70% of all the lambs born in the United States are born at the same time. So guess what, when they go to kill? And it's to your advantage if you can work with someone to provide outside that window of March, April, May, to have lambs available beyond that. So like some of the May lambs, those guys will buy them and then they'll put them on stubble and they'll try to delay it. They'll buy them at 80 pounds and they'll delay them over to March to try to then start feeding them and finish them in June, when we usually clear out our old crop lambs. You see, cattle does the same thing. Yeah, so keep some of those rules of cattle marketing and feeding the same way.
I want to take one more comment, and then I'm afraid we're going to need to break. I hate to go ahead.
I shipped to Chicago to a slaughter plant
Yep,
for 4 years. And there's the traditional and the untraditional lamb market now. You hit when the goats run out from Texas.
Yes.
You hit a lull in there.
Mm-hmm.
If you would just go back this last year and look at what the lamb market was in December, what the lamb market is in Fort Collins now, you think you're living in two different worlds. The other thing is, I feel as a producer, you need to be set so you can sell to the untraditional market, because you're going to get just as much for that 70-pound lamb on an untraditional market as you will in Sioux Falls and on a traditional fat lamb market. They went ahead and fattened that lamb. And I can't agree with you more on some of your facts about tubs and shelled corn and alfalfa hay. And an excellent place to find any information is South Dakota State University. There's got a lot of deals on YouTube about the cost of production and that stuff. But if you can balance your sales between untraditional market and traditional market, I think you're going to be a winner.
Well, just quick, if you can start getting, so if you can sell a $2.50 70-pound lamb, that's the same as you're going to get if you bring a 90 or 100-pound lamb. But if the market's not there, you've got options. You can still keep going. And that's the nice thing about it. So yes, those are strategies that you need to be employing, but know your product. Up in this country, we've got the best lamb in the whole nation. We know that, so we need to sell it like that.
40% these are 2-year-old facts, but the ethnic population in Canada and very large deals up there, Toronto, Ontario lamb, Smith lamb, all lambs are very large flocks. They're only producing 40% of what they can consume in Canada. Also, with the fires in Australia and New Zealand, I think we're gonna see an awfully good land market for 3 to 5 years. And that's just my opinion.
Brock heard me say this. Just remember, good prices make people do stupid things.
Well, yeah, I hate to break this up, and I don't want to break it up, but I also have a lady I gotta travel home with, put up with. And so, are you ready? Okay. Lots of people had something to do with lunch today. My wife has prepared some lamb meatballs for us today with garlic, I believe, and curry. Okay. And if you like them, why, tell her. If you don't, cut her, leave her alone.
So I know we got off on schedule. What time do we get back? We have some food allergies, so this
Oh,
doesn't
gotcha.
quite work for us. Because that doesn't quite fit anymore, right?
Yeah, not really. I was trying to figure out. Originally, we were supposed to do an 30 minutes ago, so we're planning on a break for an hour for lunch. So
Okay, well, we won't be that long. We'll just go eat.
perfect. That sounds good. Thank you. Yep.
We got 5 years, 2 years. I can't afford to say high prices. The thing is, in economic, that's what we have now. It's terrible. I use words because I was working on stuff like that. There's so many things that you can do so cheap. If you have a four-wire, you know, and you're worried about your sheep, cut that roll in half. That's the problem. Because cut it in half for sticks. You can cut that in half mile long. Roll that. Almost half. I don't even have to. Sometimes I can say that because East Asia, yeah, I run that. There's so many things to do. I presented here 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Down.
So what do they feel
Anyway, there was things that you could come up with, so many false ideas. This guy was trying to get everybody to interview, sell their votes, you know, and Chicago. That wouldn't work. It ain't going to work because I'm all semi-loads that goes to Chicago. They don't have the capacity in the building. And
Yeah.
what's the first thing they turn to? Their lambs, no lambs, baby chickens.
Yeah.
Get in the slaughter.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. I just wanted to let you know you're still recording.
We're not gonna do that by hand. And then we don't have a lot of live streams. So then sheep get that when everything does. But, you know, as water got developed, guess what happened? Cattle was getting. And cattle, it takes so much more work on the prairies than sheep. We're a desert animal. Some of the things talked about regarding corn, that's the perfect already made feed product to give sheep. Sheep and goats have a prehensile lip, just like the 2004. You might come stand back here and try to hear you. Better, I'm sorry. The sheep and cattle, when sheep and goats have a prehensile lip, that's the perfect formation go this way we're property. Right now, our main bunch of main ewes are with our cows. And our
See a corral.
How about now?
And you're gonna hear me bring up a lot of rangeland health and soil health types of things because it fits into that holistic design. Make the animals do your work. They got legs. They got all day to work. Let them do that. They can pick up that corn all day. And like we said, we don't want them to hog it all at once anyway. Perfect. We always try to pour on snow. Buffalo sod works great too as you lose your snow, or trying to find some firm areas. And we've got the old combines that had the little hoppers were made into cake feeders or into these corn feeders, and they're either mounted in the back of your pickup or you pull them behind it. You just pull the rope and you go. And you don't have to get out and get mauled by these sheep. But, those are those logistics that we don't have all in here, but any of those things that you see as resistances are mainly problematic. They're not deal breakers as you look at adding a sheep enterprise. I would more encourage you to look at it as this is where your kids can help. This is where your wife can be a part. And in our country, it was common for ranchers to have 200, 300 cows and then to have about that many sheep underneath the cows never impact their stocking rate because the sheep are selecting a lot of the plants that the cows are. And the sheep could, or the wife and family could handle that. And then that was a lot of their family living and clothes for school and that kind of thing. So think of it as that way. We make calve because it makes sense holistically for us. We choose to march lamb because it's not during calving, one, right? But the other thing is, if you run a cow into a shed that's pregnant and she has a calf, you go back out, she's got one calf. But if you take a ewe and you manage her right, you can run her into the shed. Instead of coming out with one lamb, you can come out with two. And that's based on your management. And getting an extra lamb out of that needs to happen if you're going to put all that labor and infrastructure and feed as far as going through the shed. In our part of the country, wool matters. Wool is a big part of our commodities. Last year, we sold 21 micron wool, 64% yield, brought $3.85. Average weight per year was 10 pounds, $38.50, $5 off for shearing. You're at $32. You can put 6 sheep in place of 1 cow as far as grazing unit. That's $180 return just on the wool. And we haven't sold any lambs yet. And those 6 sheep ought to have 9 lambs. So think about those deals like that. Ivan was talking about ASI did the budget analysis on the different regions of the U.S. So go to sheepusa.org. That's ASI's website, sheepusa.org. And up in their tab, they've got some an educational tab. It should have that budget analysis. You can click on it, pull it down, and look at it. And darned if they aren't right, because I have the same number, right? So they must be. So about $150 if you're running a ewe through a shed. You're giving her hay and corn for about 4 months, and there's 8 months out on grass. $150 operating costs on that ewe. If you're range lambing, you're somewhere between 110 and 120. So again, thinking about that, range lambing, you're probably going to get, if you have a good year, it's going to be about 95% crop. Think of calving. If you have a great year, it's going to be like 105 or something like that. And you have like last year, it was horrible with May weather. So keep that in mind. But if you're range lambing and you're getting this $30 check off the wool and you're getting $150 off that lamb, remember it matters in dollars per head, not dollars per pound. That's a $180 deal. So if we got this $180 with 120 against it, that leaves us $60. Again, if we could run 6 sheep in place of 1 cow, that's a $300 return, right? Is that right? Did I say that? No, 360 per unit compared to a cow. Okay, does that help you feel a little better on how those things fall together? And so think about that. You run them through the shed, then you can start pushing that number a lot higher on a return. And on a, on a very optimistic one, you could be almost to $80 or $100 per ewe return on that deal. But you've got to remember, you've got a labor bill to go with that. So those numbers are pretty good in that handout that I would refer to. So we better get talking about lambing time.
If you point at the computer.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
I got one like this too.
I don't know, turn off, turn on, click around.
Here, maybe my stuff is in there.
Oh, just the standard technical difficulties.
Yeah. It's fun being an extension person.
Yeah.
Help from him, I can do that. Cows, I think I need some help. So it's great, my boys pitch in and help, and they have grown up doing that, and they have a lot of confidence that way. You know, they say, I saw an article, you need a chore culture now, because kids are getting away from that. They don't understand personal responsibility and how to feel good about themselves for what they can accomplish. They don't know how to do hard things anymore. So lambing is an excellent character builder for our kids.
Holly, do you mind standing back here? You mind coming over
You
here?
gotta come over here.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay. So the biggest thing is just think of calving. Get your ducks in order and be ready for the job before the job's on you. I can remember growing up, my dad was one of them guys. We'd be fixing haying equipment when we should have been haying, kind of deal. And it's the same way when you're lambing. Is get things together and get ready. Labor is a big deal. I have a day job, so I'm gone a lot. And we get hired men once in a while, and you know how that goes. They come and go. And I got the best shepherd in the world, so you can't hire her away from me. At least that part I got. But you've got to look at labor savings, and we're going to assume most of you are going to go through a shed, and that's what a lot of this discussion is going to be related to. But if you want to visit with me or have questions about pasture and range lambing, we've done it all. We can tell you every wreck, every success that's ever happened. So get things together so you can manage these. And to tell you something, and I won't get into it a lot, but cover crops have become quite a game changer in getting ewes to breed up. We run Rambouillet ewes, and their tradition and reputation is they have no milk and no lambs, right, Nina? So, but I could not get them over about 180, 185% lamb drop before cover crops came along. We're corn and good feed and on alfalfa fields and all that kind of planning, and we get there. But when those cover crops came in and we started targeting those breeding groups into those things, and this is in October, mind you, which should be ideal because that's their normal photo period season, just like deer. We pushed those Rambouillet ewes over 200. We're 210, 215. That creates a whole bunch of new problems. You got all these lambs to deal with. But 21% protein or better in those cover crops that we're using, that we're breeding on. And then what's important, make this note, 70% of all embryonic death loss occurs in the first 25 days after conception. 70% of all embryonic death loss occurs in the first 25 days after conception.
That's your difference between your twins and your singles, right there.
Yes. So why? Why is that? Because a lot of those tight sheep herders, when they take the bucks out, they quit feeding the corn that they were flushing them with during breeding, right? And therefore the ewe goes, whoa, I was living pretty good, and now the groceries have kind of dropped away. I don't know if I can support 2 lambs or 3 lambs, so I'm going to slough some of these embryos. They are very responsive to the nutrient environment in which they live. So if you can keep that nutritional plane as good as it was when you flushed them and then through breeding, and then 30 days after you take the bucks out, you'll get those embryos to attach, and then you got something to work with. So keep that in mind. A lot of people make that mistake and they just can't get that lambing percentage up there where they want it. And we're talking Ramalays that don't necessarily have the reputation of being prolific like some of those others. And it's working. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with genetic lines. Because as we put our group together, we've got sheep from all different types of Ramblay breeders, and we're still getting those responses. So you got that done. You did that management part right. You're going to come into this deal. We've got to keep our ewe in good shape. So we look at those things. A lot of this got talked about, so I'm going to go through some of that pretty quickly. That ewe health, body condition, just like with goats, all those things you've heard, ditto. You've got to have them in good shape coming in there, especially if they're carrying multiples. You cannot skimp. If you've got twins and triplets, you've got to have them in good shape, because as soon as you take that wool off in February or March, like we've had, they're consuming everything and trying to create heat, while that last 4 to 6 weeks, 70% of all the fetal development occurs, just like in cattle. And so they're sucking nutrients into those fetuses. They're trying to keep warm. So you've got to have the best hay you can have there to understand something in that 18% or better. We try to run around 21 and self-feeders, and it's okay if they waste, because they're sheep, again, prehensile lip. What are they going to take off that hay? They're going to take the leaves off. So if you've got any rank first cutting or coarse stem stuff, they're not going to mess with it unless you grind it. So give them good stuff. And the other thing to understand that was mentioned, if you've got multiples developing in that uterus, that's putting compression against that rumen to the point you can shut that down, or that capacity limit it by 50%. Well, at the time the ewe needs the most feed, she may be getting the least feed. And so that's why the quality has to be excellent at that time. If you're going to spend your money, get good lambing hay, just that month before lambing, have that corn in there, or have that nutrition offered so that happens right. Understand, and that's why we like to use these self-feeders, they can't eat as much at that one sitting, as we should say it, because they're limited in their rumen capacity. But if you've got the feed there all day, they can go back and forth all day. And the pass-through rate of those forages actually is the same when they're pregnant. It's just that they cannot consume it at the rate they did when they're open. So just understand that deal, and you'll get along really well. And back to the ewe health, we try to shear 30 days before lambing. At that time, we also give those ewes an overeating shot of CD and tetanus. That will go through into the lamb for immunity for about 15 days after it's born. Then we start looking at providing that coverage for the lamb as well. Deworm at that time if you need to, depending on the time of year. Understand that parasites over winter up in our country will go into what we call refugia or dormancy. And so they'll just go dormant. And guess what? When the ewe lambs, and those hormones trigger for the parasites to come out of dormancy. And so that's a fecal sampling is important to see what you've got to combat. And it's great. I think you're going to have a vet talk after me right there. Your vet client relationship is super important that you get that established. That's one of those things you get established beforehand, and you have that trust relationship. And we work with 2 different vets just because we like both of them. We want to give them our business, and one, we can't get a hold of one, we've got a better chance of getting hold of the other kind of deal. And to have vets that actually care about sheep and want to learn about sheep is wonderful. So that's a great opportunity. Mouth and bag, body condition score, all those used. We'll usually mouth and bag before breeding, so we'll take those calls out right away. And then we'll look at body condition
What
score.
is that? What is mouth and bag?
Well, again, they're grazers, right? And if they don't have teeth, they can't graze. So we want them, and we get done lambing, they're going to grass, and they got to produce milk from the grass. So we just want to make sure they got a full set of front teeth on the bottom side. They got them on top, we're worried.
They wear them down.
Yeah, they'll wear down. A lot of them they'll break out. Certainly don't feed corn in on a gravel road. That would be a place to take out a whole bunch of teeth kind of deal. But and bagging is just to make sure both sides, there's two teats, make sure that there's no lumps or big teated ewes that can cause problems when they lamb, but the lamb won't be able to nurse on. And then if you've got any long toes, even on the sheared floor, we'll have some hoof trimmers and just deal with them right away while the guys are sheared. Pregnancy toxemia got talked about. You should have these in your handout, so we won't get into a lot of this. But understand that your body conditions for those ewes, and if you've got, we know we're going to have a bunch of multiples. We know that like our 6-year-old ewes, which they're still at peak production, but they're going to start their downhill slide. Those are the ones that many times will have triplets, and they're going to be compromised because of their age, in that they may be predisposed to pregnancy toxemia. So we really watch when we're doing chores and putting out corn. If there's a ewe getting up slow and she's big and she's heavy, she's a red flag. We might cut her out and treat her, feed her better corn. The other thing is, what are those ewes eating on right there in that picture? So that's your insurance policy for pregnancy toxemia. And what that is they're getting such a draw or a call for energy, and they need it right now. And you can go give them 5 pounds of corn, but they cannot metabolize it fast enough to convert it into energy to overcome that drawdown. What they need is sugar. And molasses is one of those best ones. You got your mineral pack in there, you got some protein, and they'll use it as they need it. And so if you got those question mark ewes, get a lift tub in there so they can be getting after it. I presented a similar program Wednesday, and a vet there said, if you don't have any of these things, because all the cows guys buy it out when it gets this bad weather like in March.
Yeah.
So then we're looking for it. She said use, got Mountain Dew at home, give them a dose of Mountain Dew. Just because it's got more sugar than any other pop, if you didn't know that. So, but I would think we got honey and some of those things, maple syrup. I might try one of those corn syrup types of solutions where you can get that instant sugar in there, even with cattle, if you feel that you've got to get to it right now. Pretty important. If you get a ewe go down, it's, even knowing what you're doing, it's about a 50% success rate to get them back up. If we see some that are a term and we know that we're going to have trouble, if you know they're a term, you can look at inducing them and to get them to lamb, to get that job done, because if they got triplets, which often they do, you got to get them out because that's what's draining them. And then at least you can get that going. But you'll notice them, they're off feed, they're the last ones to the bunk, they just don't feel good. They're weak getting up.
You break it?
I think so. Again,
Well, sort of.
just click the slide and then I'll let you play with it.
Oh, see, it freezes up here. I think
Oh,
problem.
that's the deal.
I'll try it.
Okay, lambing difficulties. We'll touch on these. It's certainly a vet that can help you along on this stuff. You know, every 3 to 4 hours should kind of be your routine lamb check. I can tell you, if you're out there and doing due diligence, and every hour you're in that shed stirring those ewes up, they'll never lamb until they all lamb at once. And you got to give them time. But nowadays, a lot of folks got cameras in your barn, so you're in good shape. Check them, and if you see something, you doing hard contraction, give her about 30, 45 minutes, and she should be getting the job done. If she's not, you're going to have to step in. That feeding at night thing works great, so you can lamb during the day. It's the real deal. Even on self-feeders, you just don't get a lot of lambs at night. They happen, but it's usually in the day. And can't slam. Oh, disturb that. Yeah, that's right. I already said that. Yep, gotta leave them alone. Oh, can you advance that again, Jack?
Well, geez.
We might have to, yeah. There we go. The Scotia, about coming out, you're looking at, again, they should get the job done. If not, certainly get a glove on or something that's sterile. Your own hand is not always a good thing, other than if that's what you got to do, you got to do. But you should have 3 points, right? The nose and 2 feet, and the hoof should be up and the dewflaw is down if it's coming out like it's supposed to. If you've got just 2 points, they usually have a head back. And this is, again, where the women can do this a lot better than me, because my paw trying to fit into that birth canal can be really restrictive sometimes. And so I'm in there with that finger trying to hook the jaw or the eye socket to try to pull that around. And a lot of women can get their hands through that birth canal pretty easily. Get you outside, clean gloves. Holly, do you want to show that gambrel? And then there's a picking string in there too. I don't think I got a picture of it, but again, I'm not around, so Holly's got to do this, or the boys have got to do a lot of these things without me.
Oops.
And so this deal, you can get out of Premier. Pipestone is now Premier. It's called a gambrel, and you just put it over the back of the neck, leg there, and they're not going anywhere. Yeah.
It has the string, it's worthless, but it's pretty. So
You can make your own, or then our boys like to be cowboys, so they've got their piggin string. You can do the same thing with the piggin string. Just put one leg, pull the rope over, and then tie it off on the other leg. And then you're not biting her there, and she can kind of relax. Yeah.
So when I read about this online, it says that this relaxes them, and I thought, yeah, right. How could this relax them? But when you get them caught up in this, they just chill out. So they'll just lay there for you, which is huge when you need to assist a birth or grab the lamb.
The next deal.
Your finger right here.
No kidding. I don't know what the deal is.
REL. And I got it from here. They have 2 sizes, and I've heard you can use them on calves also. Not sure why you want to, but but if you needed to. Trimming hooves, if you want to trim hooves yourself, ladies, this works for that too.
Oh yeah. Work on goats, anything.
So do you lay them on their side all the time when you're doing that? When you're putting their feet in there and like that? Are they on their side all the time?
I move them around if I feel like taking too long, because I don't want that hoof under here to hurt,
Okay.
So yeah, but usually they're on their side, on their belly. And when
So you do the belly also then?
Yeah, either, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
But I do watch that hoof that's on the ground to make sure that she's not twisted or whatnot. You don't want to hurt her.
I'm sorry. I don't quite understand. That, you're using that on the U, not on the.
Yeah, on the U. You're trying to immobilize the U. So if you've got, like, here's a breach, you know, I'm big enough, I just hold the U down by your shoulder and then I reach over here and get the job done. But again, thinking about women, and if it relaxes them, again, that's more power to the deal.
The premier catalog has a picture.
Yeah, the sliders.
With her. 44. And I don't see the smaller one, but on their website, last year they had a smaller one.
And pig and strings work just as well too.
This works better. Yeah, really quick. Get her down, put it on.
You have put it on that.
No, I haven't.
The boys, I got cowboys. We make
Sure they
have.
have.
They're on horses and they're out there being cowboys.
This would fit a big U, so because her neck is small, so this would fit. Would you need the smaller for the calf? Or, depending on their size, but.
If he's, you know, if he's a couple weeks old, it's gonna fit in that.
No, I'm thinking a newborn.
Oh,
They have a smaller one, or
Yeah.
they did last year. I haven't checked this year. Also, so. But you know, their bones are bigger. It's $18. It's pretty cheap to try.
there. I got her. Yeah. Working, Jack. Nope. Good job.
Oh, I don't know what happened there. Oh, there it goes.
Prolapse, you know, even with cattle, some of you get pretty good with that. And it's hard, again, to find. The whole deal is you can afford to take the cow to town and have the vet do the work because you still get that out of the cow. But by the time the vet comes out or you bring it in and they charge you to do it, you've just used up all the value of the ewe and the lambs, all that. So you learn, and you can do it. You can learn to do prolapses. And there's, I don't, you can explain it, but, yeah, touch on it. The sugar thing has to happen when it really first occurs to get rid of the edema so you can get it back in. But Holly, you want to talk? Holly does the prolapses too. A lot of times you'll find I'm just the good looking one at this Alum does. Yeah.
I don't use either the way we found to do it, or I found to do it where I can do it myself, even like the worst prolapse I've seen. I have my tall 14-year-old stand. How would I
He
explain?
holds her upside down with her tail
Her belly's
towards
up,
Yeah.
and her back legs are
Yeah.
here, and then I stand at her butt, I guess.
Yeah, her tail side.
He pulls her up, so her uterus and everything needs to go down. So when it's held up, then you can get it
Jump in
down
anytime.
easier. And then we put a solution of warm water in there to keep it weighted down while we suture. And I use I think it's called a purse string suture.
Yep.
And there is a special,
Needle.
I forget the name of it,
A Bruner.
Bruner needle. And it makes it really easy. It almost has a handle and you can go
Yeah.
through and like a purse or like
A trash bag.
Yep, you can go up, over, and down.
like your hoodie string. So you're doing that with suturing, and then you're going to tie it in a bow so that you can come back and untie it easily and check to see if everything's staying where it needs to stay. And if it is, then you can snip it, pull it through, and hopefully you're good to go.
And it's important to get it in there flat, and the water helps weight to get the horns
Yeah.
down.
All the
Otherwise-
way in.
Yeah.
All the way in.
Otherwise, they're going to push it past.
And
Yeah, because if you just push it in there and get it in there, but if you don't extend that uterus all the way into that vault, she's going to keep wanting to push back on you all
Gotta
the
get it
time.
through the birth canal and back
But if you don't have a nice tall 14-year-old, one of the things you can do
from the rafters,
Yeah.
found,
but you can also leave them laying on the ground, but if you pull their legs out behind you, it'll create a vault. And if you could stick something up underneath there,
Like a veil.
yeah, or something, and then that, she's kind of headed down that way, but pull the back legs back. Because I can't tell you how many times when I first got out of veterinary school, I had a boss that didn't want to share anything. And he had me trying to put a uterus in a cow that was down with her legs forward. And it's almost impossible. It's like putting toothpaste back into a tube. And then finally one day he says, well, didn't you know? And I'm like, no, I didn't know. And it's a simple trick, and you could use it on a ewe, a cow, or whatever.
There's YouTube videos.
Yeah,
Too.
that we didn't have YouTube when I got out.
I didn't either. I know, but now, boy, that's even when I fix things, track. Look at me.
having her butt up in the air.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
It's huge. On the side.
Lot of
it's
lube.
always coming back
A lot of
on
lube,
you.
yeah.
Lube, clean
And
as possible.
we use a bolus in there, especially if we feel they've been really contaminated, to try to just take care of some of that infection. You know.
No, you don't have any. Really?
Oh, I got to keep clicking. This thing just locks
I
up.
don't know if it's the internet or what it is.
I don't use retainers anymore, just doing that, so you haven't had any need for those anymore. The first string is huge, the Bruner needle is huge, huge.
You get to that right away, and you're gonna we save a lot of use. I mean, we still mark them, they're going to town, but at least you're not filling them up with drugs and everything to try to keep them alive. It just makes quite a difference.
Isn't it, don't they say first year you, during lambing, you try her again another year?
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah.
And sometimes on a registered one, you do, but
Yeah.
you want to keep practicing.
Just a minute.
You
But
know?
if it's not a first year you, during lambing.
Slideshow.
How often? I mean, what's the likelihood
Thanks.
of prolapses? What?
Some of it's genetic, some of it's feed, some of it's the year. We had one year, we just had a
I had any of them 2 years before, so.
silage. If you feed silage, don't get more than 20% because you've got a weight factor that starts pushing against things too. And yeah, it's just.
If they're standing up to eat, and I think that was our problem that year. If they're standing up, then they're putting all the pressure back and down. And
Oh, so they were kind of getting up on the feeder.
Well, they'll do like that collapsible feeder.
Uh-huh.
They'll start standing on each other. So that tells us we need more feeders. Spread it out kind of deal. So,
You seem to have
Yeah.
a lot.
exercise is important too. And it's hard to get into these years where it's so cold. Everything just got everything confined so tight. They're not getting exercise like they should. And that can really cause you some issues. Try to at least get them to go have to walk somewhere in the water. Kind of deal.
body store. And see, we didn't have them do back that year, so that wasn't it. But if they're over fat, then they're going to have more chance of prolapse also.
What additional problems do you have with twins or triplets? They wouldn't have singles. Is there more problems with retained placenta or any other additional problems?
I'll shut that.
Yeah, triplets, you have more chance of pregnancy toxemia, or just the calcemia.
Yeah.
What's the other one? And most ewes, unless you're going to separate them and feed them separately until the lamb is weaned, you're not going to do well with 3 lambs on a ewe. She'll forget one of them. One of them will end up dead. Is our.
I mean, you can, some of those ewes, if you keep the grouping pen small enough and you give them time to bond, in a jug and let it come up, about 48 hours is all you want. But when you got triplets, you're probably going to keep them in there a little longer, again, dependent on the weather, to get them bonded, get them all going. And then you put them into groups, and I've seen guys do it.
Some guys will just have triplet groups.
And they're small, and they're getting more corn, They're getting better feed so those ewes can do the milk. We don't keep a triplet on because we go out to grass a lot of times with our lambs. So they come off and we put them on either one of those milk bum lamb milk feeders, or we do the grafting, of which Holly is excellent at that. We'll talk about that. But the next deal is starvation. And I've worked with producers, and you kind of think that I've made the mistake of making assumptions that they know a few things, but I've learned just this. I'm just going to tell you, when you put a ewe in a jug, well, the first thing you do is you reach down and you check that udder and make sure it's good. Both sides are soft, they're full, and you strip those teats out, because that plug in cold weather, and if it's hard enough, that lamb will burn that brown fat out of there, which brown fat is just this super energy sugar that they've got for a limited amount of time to get them up and to get them sucking, and then they can get the energy from mom's milk. And they'll burn that up before they can get that plug loosened out of that teat, and you've lost them. And we had a producer, a young one, and he had sheep, and I assumed he knew that, but he was losing lambs, and it was because he wasn't clearing that milk canal. So, and you should be checking the udders too. And then we always check to make sure, because we know we're having so many twins and triplets now, we look for that extra one. If we've only got a single, we're certainly looking for more, because you can get surprised that way too. Tubing is another thing we'll talk about that gets rid of a lot of that starvation issue.
So do you check every ewe that only has a single and do a vaginal check?
Well, we risk that, and we can put a sleeve on and do that, but we're getting, like I said, we expect everyone. And you can kind of tell by the size of the ewes. I did have a guy tell me the other day, they do a bounce method. And I've never done it, where you get under the uterus and you push up and see if it bounces back. And if it does, it's got another lamb.
If you have 50-50 twin singles, you're not going to check. But we're down to just very few singles. So if we only get a single out, we're figuring something might be wrong and the other one's not coming. Just depends on where your rates are.
Rectal thermometers, get one. That's a big deal. To get ahead of that starvation and hypothermia, if you get down to that 100 degrees temp, they're getting into what we call a mild hypothermia. You can still tube them, but it's riskier. And if they're down below 98, you shouldn't put any milk in that gut, because you're going to do more harm than good there, because it's not functioning. Nothing's working until you warm that body core back up and get it to that 100 or better. And that's where that thermometer becomes important. You understand what we're talking about when we say tubing? I think we'll show that. Click that again.
Quick check without the thermometer. If your hand's in your glove and it's warm, you're 98 degrees. If you stick it in the lamb's mouth, I check almost every lamb, stick my thumb in there. If it's your temperature, then it's okay, most likely. If it's colder than your thumb, then it's maybe has a problem.
We're talking about this.
Carry these during lambing all the time. When you buy them, they have a plunger. You take that out, throw it away, because it's not useful. But when you have a lamb, if it's cold, if it's sluggish, if you're not sure how it's doing, if you're not sure if it's had milk yet, we just tube out of.
When you're dropping 20 to 40 lambs a day, we just don't waste time. If I know these two twins go to this ewe, and I've questioned whether that blood sucked yet, and I'm not going to be back for a while. We've got colostrum in that bottle, 2 ounces. We run that tube down, pour that in, put them in the pen, and go.
And I always carry a bottle with me so that if I come to a ewe and she has a great big teeth and I know that those little bitty lambs aren't going to be able to suck it out, then milk her down into my bottle and then I have colostrum for the next lamb that I need to. So
you don't
otherwise
have an
we also,
artificial colostrum like.
We do.
we also do, we go
but
through
you
a lot.
What you got.
We use the nursemate.
They've got calves too.
Okay.
And some of those lambs are, truly they need colostrum for about 2 to 4 days, depending on that you will have that in there. So if you've got a lamb that's not performing and you've already said, well, I've already given it colostrum, no, give it more kind of
We're
deal.
very free with our colostrum. It's expensive, but we think it saves enough lambs that you just use it.
So we keep those inside coat pockets.
So the tube stays warm, otherwise it gets rigid and cold. And you just grab the lamb and
Put his shoulders just above your knees, get his head up.
put this down. If you need to get to about here, then you know that it's in the stomach. If you meet any resistance, stop. You might be going into the lungs. But if you just can glide it down smoothly all the way up to about here, then you know that you're in the stomach.
And you can measure it to their abdomen. But, most of our lambs are all the same size, so you got a pretty good idea where that needs to be. That's just coming within an inch of that med spot.
If I'm tubing a very big lamb, I also listen. And do you hear breath sounds or do you hear just popping and crackling? The breath sound is bad. If you pour milk in and it starts bubbling, that's not real good either.
They'll choke sometimes and cough too if you're down the wrong thing, and they'll fight you a lot more if it's going into the esophagus. And most people try to go down on the left side and then palpate that tube going down the throat.
Once you figure it out,
once you've done it a couple times, you're gonna know. Once you drown one, you'll know too.
How many of you have ever tried to convince a half-frozen lamb to suck on a little pritchard? Nipple. Doesn't work.
Get their temperature up before you do this.
Yeah. This little handout here, it was very specific about what you can do and cannot do as far as giving colostrum. And their thing is that you could actually give colostrum if they had a suckle reflex, if they are 98. But if you don't have a suckle reflex, you don't stick that tube down there and give them milk because it just sits there. And I understand it just rots or whatever it does.
It's not functioning.
And to get the body temperature. So I mean, this there's really specifics on this handout, and we have quite a few of them, and it goes into total detail about when to give this milk and when not to give it, and as far as the temperature goes and the suckle reflex. Most of them, I think, when they get their mouths full, how many of them do you ever see have a suckle reflex?
Right.
Hardly any.
No.
Right?
Right.
They're 98 degrees, they're responsive.
Yeah, their brain is not even working. How do they get them
On the cow too, you got
Same
the
way.
knot on the end,
Yeah.
you can feel it. On the lamb, they are so tiny
Yep.
compared to cows. We're learning.
You don't.
Can you feel that too?
No.
You can't. So you're basically really
You're going
need to
by
judge by your
law.
measurement.
And
Yep.
never force it.
Yeah.
If
Keep it warm.
stuck, then it's in the wrong spot.
Those other latex, more rubber ones,
The orange ones you can also buy.
they're a lot more flexible, but they're smaller diameter, so the milk doesn't go through as fast. We just don't use it.
Yeah, they're kind of like a Foley, right?
Yeah.
So
But that,
we had a producer mention to us that he gives his lambs a colostrum pill. So we kind of did, and you can get it at Walmart. But I mean, we've never heard of that. We don't personally use it, but we.
I don't know why you couldn't, but there's easier ways than to try to put that
Oh yeah.
pilling.
And I think there's a lot better colostrum than in a pill form. I mean, obviously the stuff coming out of the U is the best, but artificial is even probably better than that pill. But if you don't have anything else, you don't have anything else. And so
Personally, I like the nursemaid better. We've tried other brands. It doesn't work as well as the nurse.
Mixes up the flows.
Do you use that Nutri-Crunch?
Yes, we've got it in the bucket. I'll have Polly share what she's got in her magic bucket, but that's another, those cold, last 2 winters have been horrible. So any energy you can get to them just to keep them going. And we've kept our barns tight with sheep too, trying to keep the heat in there.
If it's super cold, I put the 2 squirts of Nutri-Drench in with my colostrum, and it's right there. Some
Have you
people
ever
do the
put
corner of
them
the mouth.
in a plastic bag with warm water to warm them up?
The lambs,
Yeah, the lamb.
you sure could. That's a nice, easy, slow way. We have a sheep tack room that we keep heated. And so we've just got a box in there and I'm like,
Does the Nutri-Drench go under the tongue? Does that-
no, just the side of
Just
the
in the
mouth.
mouth.
But it gets in there better if you just mix
Do
it
it that way.
up. Get the,
Like here, I'm looking at you, and you keep your colostrum how long?
We keep it, you can keep it all day unrefrigerated. After that, you gotta refrigerate it, and I don't know.
we go through it.
Yeah.
I bet it would stay good for at least a week to
Get out
10
of it.
days.
If keep it in
Yeah.
the fridge. it's
Keep it in the fridge.
You can freeze it. When you're warming it, don't microwave it.
Don't put it in hot water, yeah.
Right.
I use glass bottles to keep my colostrum, and I have it's a teapot actually in my tap room with water in it. I just turn it on high, put my glass bottle in there, let it warm up, and that's how I warm up my colostrum. Coffee maker work too.
Yeah, any of those things. Grafting lambs. This is something that's really become a game changer for us, and we'll spend some time on it. Then Jack or Ivan, if we have to finish up, this could probably be the best place to stop. I don't know where your time is. But, so we, like I said, I got this soil health and cover crop thing going, and I got these 200% lamb crops. And then we've got all these triplets, and we're putting them on that black tech machine, which holds 60 bum lambs. But that's, if you got 60 bum lambs, and you've got, each one of them needs about a bag of milk replacement to a bag and a half. That's 80 bags. That's a pallet. And the pallet of them is over $3,000. Right? Oh my. So I created another problem. That's a good problem to have because you got live lambs. But we got to going, and Holly read up on this. The slime one is the one we use, and I'll have her talk about it. On those lambs that are born that day, she's over 95% grafting success within 10 minutes of doing it. So I'll let her explain about that. So guess what? We saved over half a pellet, or $1,500 grafting, and making every ewe have twins, because we'll tell you, well, you put your singles in a group and you feed them different. You put your twins in a group and you feed them different. You put your triplets in a group. No, all of our sheep have twins. No singles, no triplets, all twins. You got one group, and that grafting feels unbelievable.
I'll start by saying I started grafting, 15 years ago with all the ways that everybody tells you to graft. And I don't know, probably 5 years in, I gave up because with all the time it took me, the success rate was so low that I just bum lambs. So that's where I started. So then I was just I stumbled on this article reading about it, and I found a new method, which was something that we hadn't tried yet. So I thought I'd give it a shot, and I was absolutely amazed. A producer told me last week when we were presenting that he does the same thing, and out of 1,000 ewes lambed, he had 22 bum lambs. He grafted all the rest. So that's pretty huge.
That's a big deal when it comes to buying milk replacement.
We have our neighbor doing it too, and he's having success. So it's not just me. But so if I have a ewe that has just a single, then she's my grafting candidate. So I will collect her after birth if I can, as much as possible. Put it in a Ziploc or in a ice cream bucket, whatever, and I keep it somewhere that I know that's her afterbirth. And then I'm waiting for my triplet or my ewe that has a bad bag that we didn't catch. So those lambs need to be grafted, or maybe I have a brand new bum lamb. You know, I'll go up to 3 days old on my bum lambs that I'll try to graft again. If they've seen a mom, if they went straight from the ewe to the machine, it's harder to get them back on a ewe. But so my ewe has a single. I've collected her after birth, or she has more in her. I know she does. And I will get the lamb. I tie it down, 3 legs, tie it with just twine. Sisal works best. And I need warm water. The producer with the 1,000 ewes said to put some salt in the water. I haven't tried that. I'll try that this year. Warm water, put salt in it. Have your ewe tied, or have your lamb tied, and
Have the ewe in the gambrel.
you need to glove up. Yes, have the ewe down. I put her in the gambrel. If I have a boy to hold her head, the boy holds her head. I take my coat, cover her head with it, so she doesn't see what I'm doing. I bring the lamb out. Hopefully the lamb's being quiet, doesn't always cooperate. But bring the lamb out, and I'm going to cover that lamb in the warm water so it's nice and warm and wet. And then any of her afterbirth or any that I can get out of her, I'm going to cover the lamb, especially where they sniff the most, the head, the tail, the navel, ears. And I'm going to get her as wet and slimy and bloody
Looks
from
like a mess.
that ewe as I can. It's totally disgusting. The more the better. And I'm going to put my hand in the ewe up a good ways so that if she pushes against me, that's great. I want her to think that I'm assisting her in a birth. I want her to think she's having another lamb. So I will take that. I'll use that opportunity to get any more stuff gently. You don't want to rip anything in a uterus. That would be horrible.
Counterproductive.
So very gently, and you're going to get whatever and mucus, whatever that's in there that you can for the lamb. Then I will take the lamb, put it up by her head, remove my coat, gently remove the gambrel, everything as quietly as possible. You don't want to stress her out.
I won't be throwing her around.
If you have a helper, make sure that they handle them gently, because if you stress her out, she's less likely to take the lamb. So as quietly and gently and all this that you can. Put it up by her head, remove her restraints or let her go, and then back away and leave her completely alone as far away as you can get from her for 20 minutes at least.
Don't do your chat, don't do shoulders, don't do other things.
I'm usually peeking around the corner. If she's completely ignoring that lamb, maybe she's just paying attention to her other lamb that's on the other side of the jockey. Maybe I'll grab her other lamb and put it over with her lamb, or grab the tied up lamb and put it over with her lamb, whatever. So she pays attention to it. I don't ever take her lamb away completely, because then she's just worried about that lamb. But put the 2 lambs together, let her sniff and lick. You know, I might have to go back again and rearrange that lamb, but usually they will just get up and say, oh, I have another lamb, and get to licking on it. If they're licking on it good in 20 minutes, then again, quietly go in, remove the tie from the lamb so it can get up, and leave them alone again. I mark that ewe specially. I mark the lamb specially so I can keep track of them for the next 3 days. I leave them in the jockey longer than the other ewes, because I just want to make sure that that graft really took, and after the slime wears off, that she still wants that lamb. Obviously, make sure that your ewe has both good sides. I've made that mistake of grafting and then finding out she only has one good side, and that didn't do much good. What else? If it's a brand new lamb that just came out and it's still slimy and everything, you don't have to tie it. It's brand new. It'll act like a brand new lamb. You're tying it because if it's hours old, it's going to get up and go, and that ewe's not going to think that's her lamb.
You think it's a robber.
Yeah, so that's why you're tying it, so she thinks it's a brand new lamb. If it's already a brand new lamb, don't need to tie it.
Any questions on that?
Do you think this would work? I understand not as well, but could it work on your ewes that are lambing out on grass? If you didn't have a jug or what do you call it,
You'd have
jug?
to, yeah, you have to stake them. Have you done any of that, Brock?
Yeah, they'll just, herders just, try to stake in the ground and tie a little, like 3-foot rope to a front foot so that she can't leave. On the ewe? On the ewe.
Yeah, then the lambs.
Yeah.
Do the same kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And does that work to a point?
Good point, yeah.
You gotta be careful out in the range lambing that you're not messing too much, because you start having ewes move off and leave lambs, and start creating more confusion.
And that's more stressful on the ewes, so I would imagine the success rate maybe a little less, but.
But no, that's been quite a game changer. You know, created an issue and we've solved that. And then to be able to manage the ewe flock as a twin group is a pretty big deal. Yeah.
So if you lose your ewe while she's lambing, but the lamb,
Yeah.
do you let it dry before, if you're gonna graft it, let it dry with her scent before you take the ewe scent you're gonna graft it to? Yeah, no, that doesn't matter, okay. Just as long as her scent's on
As
that
long as we
lamb.
got a candidate. If we don't have a candidate, then it goes in the bump thing. And then, like she said, keep it in there 3 days.
Usually after 3 days.
you don't.
They're on
Try
that bump machine. You got them started.
Is this, you're getting a 200% lamb count?
Yeah, we're over 200%.
And that's with the ram lay.
Mm-hmm. No,
And
that's,
is that
for us,
kind of
that's
against, yeah, I understand, but is that commonly known or commonly people understand that they can get those kind of lambing
Yes.
rates? That's a,
if they're
if they
going
had the
through the
right
shed,
nutrition.
if you're going through the shed, you've got this investment in infrastructure and labor and feed, then you're trying to get as much return out of that management as possible.
But an average lamb crop through the shed would be,
Well, beginner, I would say 130%. You know, beginner, we got 130, it's good, because you got to learn that feed side. And if somebody guided you there, then you can figure a 10% mortality rate in lambing just like that, even going through the shed.
Paul would be,
but the actual number of lambs, getting that up to 2
Mm-hmm.
is really driven by your nutrition, right?
Well, genetics plays a role. They've got to be predisposed to do that. Like the fin sheep, we'll have 6. So we'll have 6 little rat-like ones. They don't do a lot of good, but no, we just want 2. There's those polypays. Those guys are 250, 300% eastern South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota. That's where they're living. And then everything's confined, everything's fed distillers and soy hulls, and they get along great.
And they keep them, that's confinement.
Yeah, that's
all
confined.
year
Yep.
round.
Well, depends on the model. Some are, some of those guys are landlocked. One family lambs out 6,000 ewes, and they start in October and finish in end of May, 1st of June. And they, every 60 days, those ewes are weaned, or the lambs are weaned and the ewes are dried off. The ewes go west and South Dakota to graze dry.
Okay.
So they get them out of there.
And how old are them lambs when you wean them?
60 days, they're doing it.
What's
Some of
the
those
norm?
guys will push 40. Out on range models, you're at 120.
Okay, 4 months.
Yeah.
Is there opportunity for the place that has 6,000 ewes to send the dry ewes out? People like us to just
Yes,
dry
yes, yes, there is that. I actually lined up a deal with them to take 1,000 ewes to central South Dakota in a herder to graze western snowberry, bushbush, and leafy spur. And that's what they did. And they even paid the ranch to do that. So the ranch saved the chemical bill, plus got paid $30 an animal unit to do that. The ranch did great on it. So yes, those opportunities exist.
Any more questions for David Hawley? Yeah, we probably better.
And one quick question on that, to get that kind of ovulation.
Yeah.
You're doing that mainly through your cover crops and supplementation both?
And natural breeding season. Remember, sheep are photo period sensitive in October, just like deer. And deer do the same thing. If they're living good lives, our deer up there in that country, we can't get rid of those whitetails. They keep having twins and triplets. It's the same thing. So time of year is right. That's natural. Then we're giving them that nutrition. And if you're taking them from a body condition score 2 or 2.25, and then you're giving them this flush, as they call it, that's where you have the best response. And then you just keep that nutritional plate going until 30 days after. And in recent years, it's gotten cold, so I've just kept it going anyway. So we haven't dropped our corn deal off. But yeah. Yeah, again, quality of life. You got to balance what you want to do.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Let's give him a hand. Did you have a presentation, or are you just gonna?
No, I do have a few. I just want to touch on a few things.
Perfect.
But yeah, you can.
So our next speaker, guys, we'll go ahead and just transition to our last speaker is Dr. Rankin from over in Crawford, and she'll give a little background about herself, if you don't mind, and then has a few points to talk on.
Stay here, right?
Yep, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, there's some handouts here, and I'm pretty sure we don't have quite enough for anybody, but if you contact Melissa,
Or I got your emails.
she can send you a copy. This little copy right here was the one that I was talking about. It goes into pretty much detail about hypothermia and hypoglycemia. So anyways, I am Dr. Regina Rankin, and I live in Crawford. I came to Crawford in 2012 when this country was on fire. Just about packed up and went back home because I never seen anything like it. I'm from the middle part of the state, Spalding, Cedar Rapids, Wallback. There's probably no sheep around there that I know of. I practiced there for 7 or 8 years and practiced in eastern Nebraska, western Iowa for 7 or 8 years. And I worked on a few sheep there. Matter of fact, my second employer, he was a big sheep producer and raised registered sheep, and he probably taught me more about sheep than I ever learned in vet school. So Dr. Holstein, he was a real nice and a very, very good sheep producer. So I came to this part of the country. I used to work on cattle. I can't work on cattle anymore. I had too many injuries. So now I work on small ruminants, some horses, and mostly small animals. My facility isn't really equipped to handle sheep and goats yet, but however, we did a C-section last night, and we had a live ewe and a live lamb, so we made it work in the small animal part of that. So Mr. Hawthorne brought me over a sheep and a ewe, and I can't believe both of them walked out alive, so that was kind of amazing for us, especially since we don't get to do very many C-sections on ewes. Matter of fact, that was my second one. So I'm here in this part of the country, and I'm not saying that I'm a sheep expert, because I'm not, because I haven't got an opportunity to work on them. I try to help everybody out whenever I can. I've got one gal that works for me. She raises a lot of sheep, Vicki Milner. She couldn't come because she's at a graduation. And I think they probably have about 200 ewes. I think they've had up to 400 ewes, and her dad's trying to slow down a little bit. And they have a couple of different kinds of sheep. Polypays, I think, is something, and some crossbreds. So I'm here to talk about hypoglycemia and hypothermia. And in case you don't know those words, hypoglycemia is just a low blood sugar, and hypothermia is cold. And this here pamphlet that I kind of like this pamphlet, except for old people. It's really, really tiny letters, but it goes into specifics about what and when to give colostrum to a cold lamb. And so hypoglycemia and hypothermia is probably the #1 cause of death in pre-weaned lambs. So if a person can get on top of this with your program, you could probably save a lot of youngsters. So if anybody has any questions, and you can go through here, the big cutoff is this 37 degrees Celsius, which ends up being 98.6 degrees. If anything's lower than that, then you definitely, which I call it 99, which is close enough, anything below 99, you've got a cold lamb. And you better be doing something about it or they're not going to make it. So the first thing that you have to establish is what you're going to do about it. And if this lamb has a suck reflex and you can get some kind of response on it, the first one we're talking about is mild hypothermia. You need to get this colostrum, warm colostrum, into this animal as soon as possible and then get it warmed up. And if you have an animal that is below the 98 but still has a suckle reflex, which you rarely will see, at least I've never hardly ever seen it in my time, and they say that you can put the warm colostrum into the lamb and then start warming the animal up. However, if you have one that's below 99 and does not have a suckle reflex, then you had better use some sugar solution, and that's just this dextrose. And there is a detail on how to mix that up. You're going to take like 20 cc's of this 50% dextrose with 30 cc's of warm water, and then you're going to give that in the abdomen. You're going to go like 1 inch below the belly button off to the side, and then you're going to put a 1-inch needle, that's a 20 gauge, in there, and with a syringe, and put that in to the animal's perineum. And then start warming that animal up, and when that animal gets up to 99, then you want to come back with your colostrum. So this thing would be awesome if it would get blown up and you could read it better, but this could be like a little Bible, because this is some very, very good information. It not only then tells you how to give that fluid into the stomach, it also tells you how to tube an animal. And then it goes into some detail about what this warming box should be. So just a direct light coming down on the top of the lamb, I don't think is sufficient. Don't you think we need to have heat underneath?
Well, we just have the pack so it's warm in there to begin with.
Uh-huh.
The lamp on the box is warm. Yes, it needs to be surrounded.
Surround, not just coming down. And then there's this article in here, and I didn't know this. I mean, this is some new information. They do not recommend that you submerge the animal in warm water and approach to dry it off. Number one thing that it does is it takes the scent of the mother away, and then you're back to that grafting business, which sounds horrifying to me. So I did get to help raise sheep when I was about 10 or 12 years old. We had 200 Suffolk ewes, and all I remember about it is the buck chasing us over the fence. But I'm sure, and I did get to show 1 year in 4-H with that. So, but we tried to find some, and I got to give this credit to Vicki, Milner. She came across some of these pamphlets, and they're very educational, and they're pretty easy to read. And if you have any questions and you don't understand any terminology at all, don't be afraid to ask. We don't expect all of you people to know veterinary and scientific terminology, because they are using it in some of these articles. So if you have any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to try to answer any questions. And anything else that you have a question about sheep that I can help?
Touch on, I touched on the vet-client relationship, but that so many drugs are not labeled for sheep, and the importance of having the vet working with it.
Well, there's one thing that I have to confess that I do. And I probably need to do a little bit more checking because it's approved for cattle. And so I'm a woman and I've had children. But if I have a ewe like I did last night and I had a C-section, before I started anything, I gave this animal a shot of Banamine. Okay, and Banamine is a pain reliever and it's for toxins. Now, I don't know if this helped this animal or not, but all I can think about is what she was going through. And I know what the drug does.
We use that. Or better prescribed.
So do you use it IM, IV, or sub-Q?
Usually it's sub-Q, so remember that.
Yeah, sub-Q.
Sub-Q?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because it used to be IM, and then it went IV with cattle, and now I'm not even up on my bovine standards or whatever, but I just know. I'll just tell you a little story about this ewe, because this was, first of all, I don't have the facility to do this, right? So we're looking for a place to do this. This uterus, when I went in and did a vaginal check on her, I have 2 feet, I have a head and he's upside down. But every time I pulled on this lamb, the whole uterus would come. So I had a twisted uterus. Mm-hmm. So the big thing was, I think that was the savior of this thing. Well, first of all, he brought me a ewe that didn't have 5 hands in it. Because normally I don't get them that way. It's just like everybody and their neighbor try to get something out. So I said the only way we're going to save this animal and the baby, and it was still alive, is to do a C-section. And I told him, I said, I'm not set up to do this. So I said, we got to figure something out. I said, I'm old and I can't even be on the ground. So we went into our small animal grooming tub and put this animal in there. So she's like this. And so sure enough, that uterus was twisted down toward the bottom. It's clear at the bottom. When I pulled the lamb up to take him out of the uterus, it tore. Right at the bottom, it just tore. So I have blood going everywhere, and I'm holding on to that, and I'm cutting this to get this lamb out. I had 4 assistants. That was the beauty of it. They took the lamb out, got the lamb out, everything, lamb's fine, and I'm trying to save this ewe because of this hemorrhage. And we're sewing, and I'm sewing, and I'm trying to find it. All of a sudden, her head just clunks back and hits the wall. And the producer, the owner, is sitting there, and he says, well, she's going to die. He says, what? You don't need to finish sewing her up. And so we're talking, the lamb's up walking around, and it's nursing on my leg, and oh yeah, we're all talking whether or not we should just let her die. Well, I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to sew her up. I started sewing her up, and her respirations were getting better. She's got a palpebral now, and she's kind of coming around, and I'm like, okay, maybe we're going to be all right. So I sew as fast as I can. Long story short, sew the thing up, and we have 3 women, 2 older women, me and another, this guy, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to get this ewe to the trailer. So I have an old gurney. It's an old army gurney. We put her on the gurney, and we're taking her out, and we got everybody on a post, and we're going, and all of a sudden she jumps off. And if I would have stepped on her halter, she would have ran down on the street. So we pull her in there, and I haven't called him, and I still don't know if she's alive or not, but she was alive in the trailer. That was my last night. I've done 2 C-section on ewes. She was the second one that lived. The first one was one of the first case scenarios where everybody and their brother had their arm up there. So, do you do C-sections on sheep?
No.
So I told him, I said, I don't know if this is economical. He says, I don't care. Save my sheep if you can save it. I said, okay.
The only time we've done that is if they're down and, they're going to die. So we'll C-section.
You just get the lamb out. Yeah.
4 things for a good C-section like that. You need paper towels, gloves, a razor blade, and 22.
You ruined my story. So anyways, the lamb, though, I could not believe it. I mean, here he is, and I'm sewing, and he's just like, on my leg. So it was pretty funny. Anyways, any questions about, anybody get a chance to look over this? Do you have any other things? Do you understand the importance of the temperature and having a thermometer? I mean, these are like a $5 or $6 deal. These can save you a lot of money. Get yourself a bottle of this. I think this is like $6 or $7. It's not expensive. This is dextrose 50%, and it tells you how to mix it with the warm water. If you're going to do this belly deal and put it in the peritoneum, you need to boil the water to sterilize it, so you're not putting germs into the baby. And you need to use a sterile needle. I don't want something that's been stuck in some other bottle or in another animal. It needs to be something that's out of a cap. And so, you don't want to create more of a problem than you already have, because you've already got something that's probably got less than a 25% chance to live.
Could you use like distilled water or like?
Well, you can use
water.
You don't have to use distilled water if you're going to boil it first. Okay, but you don't want, you want to boil it, but you don't want it boiling hot when you're putting it in there. You just need to boil it, just like the old days, boiling water and getting sheets for a pregnant lady. But I mean, think about it. And this, something like that, what it would cost you, would not even be $1, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you can do that, and then you get the animal warmed up, and then you give them the colostrum, and you're just giving it right into the abdomen. And if you hold the little guy up like this, and then, well, it's easier if you have somebody, and then they hold him up by his front legs, then the organs are going to go to the bottom, and you're going to aim for that belly button and right off to the side. And you don't have to go in the whole inch. Just get in there far enough that you're in, and give this whole syringe full. It'll be 20 cc's of dextrose and 30 cc's of water. And it goes into detail about weight and how much and whatnot. It's very specific. So like on this page here, it tells you if you have a 5-pound one, 25 total, 10 cc's of dextrose, 15 cc's of water. So it's kind of a neat little handout.
Dr. Rankin, could you make like that mixture up and have it like in a jug?
No.
So you have to do it right away.
No, you cannot do that, because bacteria is going to grow.
Right.
Bacteria will grow in here. And if you're not using this needs to be in the refrigerator. If you open this up and set it on your counter and you go back there 2 weeks later, I guarantee you there'll be stuff growing on there. Because this has to be kept in the fridge after you open it. And so, no, you can't have that water set up ahead of time. But you got to have a tea kettle, right, out there in that lemon shed.
Your hot plate.
Yeah.
And
I think I was only supposed to talk about chilling and that and starvation. You want me to talk about anything else? Because I think you need to go out and enjoy the weather out at Connie's.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Does everyone understand how the brown fat just on little lambs? I think the smaller ones are worse than the bigger ones. They will get colder and starve way faster than the bigger ones. The time frame is just so short. I mean, before they're actually starving to death. They just do not have any substance to keep them alive.
Well, I think that wraps. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Reagan. Let's give her a hand.
I'm not going to forget them.
Did you want to, Missy, did you want to do that? Before everybody takes off, did you kind of want to give a background on what we're doing?
Okay, yeah. All right, we're going to do our door prizes real quick. And then we'll be headed out to Connie Moore's